For most businesses, security is just seen as a cost, right? A necessary evil you have to pay for. But what if I told you that's completely the wrong way to think about it? Today, we're going to dig into strategic security, and I promise, by the end of this, you'll see how the smartest companies are turning it from a simple defense into a massive competitive advantage. So, let's get into it.
Okay, so here's what we're going to cover. First, we'll get a handle on the kinds of threats we're all facing today. Then, we're going to get the lingo down, building a solid foundation. After that, we'll move from theory to practice and look at a real-world assessment. And finally, we'll tie it all together and see how great security actually helps a business grow. All right, let's jump right in. We've got to understand the world we're living in. Now, when I say security threat, what pops into your head? Probably some hacker in a dark room with a hoodie, right? Well, the truth is that's just a tiny piece of a much, much bigger puzzle.
So let me ask you a question. What does a criminal ransomware attack have in common with a natural disaster that completely shuts down a shipping port? I mean, on the surface, they seem like totally different things. But if you're running a business, they're the exact same problem. They're both major disruptions that you need a strategic plan for.
And this really shows the two sides of the coin. On one side, sure, you've got your criminal threats, people intentionally trying to do bad stuff. But on the other, you have non-criminal threats, which honestly can be just as devastating. A modern security leader isn't just building a firewall against hackers anymore. They're building an organization that's resilient enough to handle everything from a flood to a simple, honest mistake by an employee.
Now, if we're going to build those kinds of defenses, we have to start with the basics. We all need to be speaking the same language. And trust me, getting these next few terms right is absolutely essential. Because if you don't, your planning can completely fall apart before you even start.
First up, threat. Let's use a simple analogy here. Imagine your organization as a castle. The threat is the dragons circling outside the walls. It's the what or the who that has the potential to cause you harm.
Next, we've got vulnerability. This is the weak spot. It's how the threat could actually get in. So back to our castle. The vulnerability isn't the dragon, it's the unguarded gate in the castle wall. I mean, the dragon can't do much if there's no way for it to get inside, right?
And that brings us to the big one, risk. Risk is what happens when that threat meets that vulnerability. It's the actual potential for loss, the probability that the dragon will find that unguarded gate and wreck the place. So the key thing to remember is no vulnerability, no risk. It's as simple as that.
Now you might be thinking, this is just words, but it is so critical in the real world. If you tell your team to prepare for the risk of hackers, what does that even mean? The hacker isn't the risk, the hacker is the threat. The risk is that the hacker will exploit a vulnerability, like unpatched software. If you mix these up, you end up buying the wrong stuff, training for the wrong things, and leaving these giant, critical blind spots in your defense.
Okay, so we've got the language down. Now let's zoom out a little. We need to talk about the difference between the high-level game plan and the specific moves you make on the field. You know, the blueprint for the house versus the actual act of hammering the nails.
And this is a classic point of confusion. Risk management versus risk assessment. People use them interchangeably all the time, but they're not the same. Risk management is the big picture strategy. It's the entire ongoing program for how your organization handles risk day in and day out. A risk assessment is a tactic. It's a single tool you use within that program to get a snapshot in time of specific risks.
Here's a really easy way to remember it. Think of risk management as your entire health and fitness plan. Eating well, exercising, getting enough sleep. It's the ongoing lifestyle. So what's a risk assessment? That's your annual checkup with the doctor where they take your blood pressure and run some tests. One is the ongoing strategy, the other is a vital but tactical check-in.
So we know what it is in theory, but what does a risk assessment actually look like? Let's stop talking in abstracts and walk through a real, standardized process to make this all concrete. So a major industry standard from ASIS lays out this really simple four-step process. You always start by asking, what are our most critical assets? What do we really need to protect? Once you know that, then you ask, okay, what could harm it? From there, you go hunting for the weaknesses, the vulnerabilities. And it's only after all that, once you have all the pieces, that you can actually analyze the true risk and decide what to do about it.
Let's apply this right now. Imagine a small app developer. Their number one asset? Their server with all their customer data. That's the crown jewels. A major threat is, of course, a ransomware attack. They do some digging and find a vulnerability. Their server software is totally out of date. So the resulting risk is a high probability of a massive data breach and their whole service going down.
The countermeasure? It becomes pretty obvious, doesn't it? They need to set up an automated patching system. See how it flows logically from one step to the next?
And this brings us to our final section, and honestly, maybe the most important one. All this work we're talking about, it isn't just about preventing bad stuff from happening. When you do it right, security stops being a cost center and becomes a real business enabler, something that actually drives value.
If we look at some data from the 2022 Security Benchmark Report, we can see where the money's going. And what's really interesting here is the trend. Spending on old-school things like physical guards is pretty much flat, but investment in technology and, importantly, training for your people, that is way up. It shows this clear shift towards smarter, more proactive security.
And the report gives us some incredible insights. The most successful companies aren't hiding their security folks in the basement. No, they have them at the big table, helping to shape business strategy. Training is no longer just about checking a box for compliance. It's about turning every single employee into a proactive threat spotter. And this is critical. They're using data, real metrics, to prove that security has a positive return on investment.
So the bottom line is this. A mature security program does way more than just stop you from losing money. It creates a stable, resilient environment. And it's that stability that gives a company the confidence to innovate, to expand, and to take the smart risks it needs to for real growth.
And that really just leaves us with one final question for you to take away. When you look at your own organization, is your security plan just another line on a budget sheet that needs to be minimized? Or is it a strategic investment that makes your entire business stronger and more successful?